Of those 21 that didn't turn into leads, what was the reason that didn't get converted to a lead?
Just a lot of people that, I guess, calling for.
Well, hello and welcome to the J. Sterling Hughes Show. My name is Jeff Hughes and I'm your host. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Sterling Lawyers. We are a 27 attorney family law firm doing over 17 million in revenue. And my purpose here is to share with other family lawyers what we are doing and what I'm experiencing and seeing so you can build the practice of your dreams and learn from my mistakes and so forth. If you have been a listener of our show, you've been following along over the past, 12 months, Tom. We've been following Tom Hartin. He's a law entrepreneur who has opened up a family law practice on Long Island. So he started in September of last year. So we just concluded our 9th month, Tom. We're now recording here in, June 11th, and we're going to talk about May, which you had a massive month. So
Yeah.
What happened in May?
May was a great month all around, both in terms of revenue, in terms of signing new clients. And, I guess for the revenue, I did have 2 trials, one of which was a 1-day trial, completely wrapped up. The other one was day 1, what looks like is going to be a 3-day trial. Our courts are so backed up that trials, like days between trials are like a month apart.
Wow.
So day 3 was actually in June. I just did that last week. So we're talking about May. So that was day 1 of trial. So, that's a big part of that revenue. But leads were great. Hires were great. Call volume went up. Yeah, I'm seeing great stuff all around.
Good. So what happened with trial 1?
Trial 1. So trial 1 was a support trial. So those are generally smaller trials.
Yeah.
Basically just focusing on financials. They're easier. And I found out I loved that trial. It's easy for me from a mental standpoint, I guess, right? If you lose a custody trial, someone, loses custody of their kids. If you lose a support trial, at least this is what I tell myself, they pay a little bit more money. Worst case, go get another job. Work a few more hours, something like that. That sounds terrible.
Yeah.
But, as someone who's currently working a ton of hours, someone who's working.
Your sympathy level for hard work is low.
Yeah, someone who's working 30 hours a week and tells me they can't afford their support payments. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, like you said, my sympathy's not that high. Yeah. But that trial was a slam dunk. So we had. I think I could talk loosely about numbers. I'll round them off. I'm not giving anything away here. So this gentleman was paying $3,000 a month in child support, and settlement. This settlement from the other side was just wildly unreasonable. Agreed to go down to like $2,000. Guy's been unemployed for like a year and a half. He offered to continue paying $1,000 a month until he found a job, which was a generous offer. And he, when we went to trial, he said he would be happy with anything under $1,200 a month. He asked, did I think I could get him there? And I said, I think I could. And we got an order of $800 a month. So
wow,
that was
good for you.
Yeah, so that was a big
good for him too.
He was extremely happy. Really, really good guy. Just overall great client to work with. So I was really happy with that one all around.
Fun.
Yeah. So that was a smaller one. That wasn't that was a 1-day. Not even. It was like a 3/4 day trial.
Yeah.
Nothing massive there. But the other one is the flip side of that. That this one is a full scale custody trial. Definitely fighting a major uphill battle on this one.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Those are hard.
Really hard. And it is. It's the first time. I know when I made the switch from my previous job into doing family law, my thought was I wanted a job that I cared about the outcome. I like, helping people solve their problems and, I don't know, just, helping people get to where they want to get. It's a double-edged sword, man. I never lost any sleep doing my corporate job, wondering if X corporation would get, patent number 208 for the month. Yeah. You get some sleep when you're fighting an uphill battle for someone getting custody of their kids. It's hard.
Yeah, the stakes are high, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And it is. It's an uphill battle. There's a lot going on there. Where that one I can't really talk about too much without giving too much away.
Correct. Yeah,
we're still in the middle of it. But
I
don't know, that one's tough. But that's the one where a substantial amount of money has come in.
So let's switch gears and kind of run off your financials. What happened last month financially and with your metrics?
Sure. So top line revenue, definitely my biggest month so far was just over $24,000. I had 9 leads. So I guess we're tracking calls too. I think my calls went up from 13 in April to 20 in May. And then I would say 9 of those 20 calls were leads, and 7 of those turned into consults. And the only reason those other 2 didn't turn into consults were because I had conflicts with the trial dates. So they said,
Oh,
I
okay.
have a hearing date
And you,
on X. And then of those 7 consults, 4 of those were hires.
wow, your lead quality is strong.
Yeah, and so I guess that's a question. Maybe we should have talked about this offline, but something in terms of tracking, right? So I haven't been tracking incoming calls too much lately, but now I have an easier way to do that. So I know for a fact I got 21 calls in May,
Mhm.
and 9 of those turns into leads. And if it wasn't for the conflicts that I had, I pretty much have 100% lead to consult conversion because I'm doing free consults. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Someone calls and says, I'm looking for a divorce consult. Do you give free consults? And I say, yes. They're not going to say, okay, never mind. You know what I mean? They're pretty
Yeah.
much all of them
Looking for
are
it.
coming in for their consult, right? So maybe what's better to track for me is calls, total calls, how many of those calls are actual leads, and then how many of those turn into actual hires. So I'm going to try to do that better going forward.
Of those 21 that didn't turn into leads, generally, what was the reason that didn't get converted to a lead?
Well, 20, so not 21, right? I had 20 total calls, 9 of them were leads. So 11, you mean?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 12 of them, excuse me. So
Yeah.
12 of them those 12 calls, generally, what were those?
Some, I don't know, just a lot of people that I guess calling for different areas of law. I had someone call and
Okay.
ask if I could notarize a document for them. I was like,
Okay.
no, I don't do that.
So you're truly tracking all of your incoming calls, no matter what they are.
Well, yeah, I
And
don't even have to track it. Google Business tracks it for me. It's part of my Google Business profile. So at the beginning of each month, I get a report from Google Business Profile showing, how many calls, how many website visits, how many clicks, stuff like that. So I don't even have to track that personally. And I only discovered that about 2 months ago. So I
oh,
don't
wow.
know
Okay.
why I wasn't using that before. So yeah, I can say definitely my numbers are more accurate recently. But yeah,
So the
I
ones
would
that you
say
possibly could help, you counted those as leads that had a family law matter, basically.
yes, a family law matter
Yeah.
in our area. Yeah, and I still get calls every once in a while from, asking if I do Brooklyn or if I do Manhattan, which at this
Mhm.
time I just don't. I think maybe when I hire somebody, I will. I'm in Nassau County. I do Nassau. I do Suffolk. Sometimes I will do Queens if I think the case is worth it. Because that courthouse
Mhm.
is a good 45-minute plus drive for me.
Yeah.
But going into Brooklyn, we're talking about an hour plus each way. So I'm
Yeah.
not taking cases there just yet.
Yeah. That's a long haul.
Yeah.
So you had 4 hires, and those 4 hires, do those come from the 7 consults, or were they holdovers from prior months?
I would say probably a mix. Yeah. 3 of them were from that month and one was a holdover.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good. So you still have a pipeline of potential clients that are going to eventually convert over when the timing's right for them, sitting there right now.
I think so. Yeah. I have,
Yeah.
well, actually, so that fourth one, again, it's hard for me not to talk about the current one, but they did sign yesterday. So
Oh,
so I did wind up
okay.
signing
Yeah.
all 4 of those actually. But that's a
Nice.
June question. Yeah. In terms,
Yeah.
I don't know, I wouldn't say I have a pipeline of people that I'm waiting for. I think maybe I have 1 or 2 that might sign.
Hmm.
I think most of my calls and consults that I've done so far, they've either signed or indicated that they've gone with another attorney. So like, well, again, there was one that I consulted with. So one of those 7, I don't know how she found me. She's in East Quogue, which is about pretty much the Hamptons, right? So we're talking an hour and 20 minutes from my office. So when
Oh,
she came
wow.
in from a consult, I didn't ask the question, but actually I did. I said, "How did you find me?" And I forget what her answer was, but I followed up with her like a week later, and she said I wound up going with an attorney that was more local, and I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. Um,
Yeah.
so
She drove an hour and 20 minutes to meet with you?
yeah, weird, right?
Oh,
I don't know
wow.
how she, yeah, I don't know how she found me.
Wow. Well, that's just something about your website and that she trusted you enough to drive 100 hour and 20 minutes to meet with you,
Yeah,
passing a lot of other offices.
yeah, and she was super nice. She said the consult went well, and she just decided to go with someone more local.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Can't blame her for
definitely
that.
couldn't write her on that. Yeah,
Wow. Good. So congratulations on your strong month, at least
yeah,
top line.
thanks. Yeah, May was great, and I'm thinking June will be hopefully equally as good.
Well, I'd love to see your leads increase. Nine's been pretty consistent with what you've had in prior months. So I'd love to see that continue to go up.
Yeah, me too. And I know, so yeah, I know Rocket Clicks they're doing their thing. I forget what the last update was. I have a call with them tomorrow, but they're starting to do all the backlinks and I don't know all the technical jargon, but doing things where they say,
Yeah.
once that's completed, I should see a pretty pretty quick and immediate, jump in my rankings. And the one thing I'll say is kind of what I expected. I'm dominating Massapequa and the surrounding areas. So I think if someone is looking in Massapequa or a bunch of the other, smaller towns around my office, I'm number one in that map. In Melville, I'm still nowhere to be found. I think I went from over the last month from like position 24 to position 19, which pretty much means nothing. Until you get into the top 5, ideally in the top 3.
Right.
So I don't know. That seems like a long ways away to me, but whatever. Massapequa seems to be going well, and I think there is a back pocket plan to run ads if I need to, but I'm trying to hold off on that just to keep expenses low.
Well, I'll congratulate you again, Tom. In 9 months, this is pretty good. I know you're not like feeling like you're where you need to be, but 9 months.
So in May, I am. I feel good about May. I was, looking back at April and March, I was, we're talking 10,000 and 13,000 respectively in those months. That's not where I want to be. 24, yeah, of course I still want to keep going, but I'm happy with that number for 9 months.
Yeah.
And it's especially if it's on an upward trajectory. I'm good with that.
It certainly is.
Yeah. So,
my emotions always rise and fall on the number of leads coming in, because that's to me is future stuff. So I'm always looking out months down the road. So I don't look so much at the dollars today. I look more like the leads. I don't know why my brain thinks that way.
Yeah. And I guess, I don't know. Every case is different, because I know you said last month, if I had a really slow April, right? I only had one hire in April, that I would have a slow August. But one of my hires in May is like, I'm working that case like around the clock. I'm probably, in 3 weeks, I'm already almost, $8,000 into that case.
Wow.
So I guess it doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah.
So it depends on the case. Obviously, that's one that was transferred to me, because that's already going, and there's motions that I need to jump on immediately. So
So you took that case from another attorney?
I did, yes.
Yeah.
And I've heard enough people say that's a kind of a red flag. But I met with her, and I don't think I'm in a position to be turning people down based on that alone yet. And she seemed nice, and she had a reason why she left her previous attorney, and basically that reason was the communication was really poor. She was having trouble getting a hold of her, and that that's a common complaint, and that's not a complaint I've ever gotten. I definitely am not as well, I shouldn't say definitely, but obviously I have less experience than someone who's been doing this 20 years, but I think I am a better communicator, and I am a better, making sure I'm reaching out to people and keeping them updated on their cases as much as I can. So, obviously
that's 80% of your job is communicating with your client.
I agree. I mean, if, I looked back at all the motion practice, and the other attorney was doing on paper what she should have been doing, I didn't find anything that I was like, wow, this attorney screwed this case up. It literally was just, she wasn't communicating with the client.
Yeah.
So it does show how important that is.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on your big month. As you're looking ahead, you're considering hiring. You're just not sure what. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, I am. And I'll do one quick thing before we get to that, is that I'm moving my office space. I think I have vented a few times on this podcast about my disdain for my office space. So I found this amazing spot literally across the street. Not even across the street. It's across like a pathway. And it is the same price. And for reference, now I'm in a small windowless office. This is probably 3 to 4 times the size. I haven't measured the square foot, but 2 individual offices, with their own doors, and then a smaller open area with reception for like a reception area. Has its own own fridge, own sink, stuff like that, and it's a really nice building. So I think I got really lucky finding that. So I'm really excited to move into that. She did say just moving your business address. You could, and when I say she, I'm talking about Danny from Rocket Clicks, that you could see, a quick dip in your Google business profile rankings, just because, that Google needs to, make sure your business, that the move was legitimate or something like that. So, that's something I could anticipate. But she said, we're talking a few weeks to, a month,
Mhm.
month and a half tops. So nothing I'm concerned about. And it does give me space to bring on another person, which
Yeah.
that's why I wanted to say that first. So yeah, now
Yeah.
one of my worries about hiring is, I have room in Melville to hire somebody, but I don't have any business in Melville yet. I have
Mhm.
one client from Melville.
Mhm.
And but Massapequa is the place where I would need to hire them. And so now but I
Mhm.
didn't have the space for them, and now I do. So that,
Mhm.
that's one
Yeah.
obstacle. I don't need to worry about finding them a space.
So is your current lease a month-to-month lease?
Yes,
Or
it's month to month,
okay.
which was a
Oh, nice.
very, very lucky there.
Yeah. And the new lease you're signing, is that a term lease or is that another
Yeah, but
month-to-month?
so it's funny. I met with the landlord, and he said he doesn't do 1 year leases. Talked to him for 20 minutes, and I was able to get him to sign a 1 year
Oh,
lease
really?
for the same price. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Just
Do you have options on the backside of that?
Um, yeah, I
So,
mean, he
like,
did say,
maybe
the downside of signing a 1 year lease is, there could be an increase like 3 to 4% if I decide to go ahead. But that's not a number that, it's a we're talking $1,200 a month.
yeah,
So, 3 to 4% is not anything that's going to scare me away from signing an office.
right.
If it's
Yeah.
1250 next year, that's not going to, that's not going to
Yeah.
make me run away.
Not gonna break your
Yeah, right.
break your finances.
Yeah. So now on to the topic of hiring. I I am looking. So for the people that have been following, I am still working for another company doing kind of on a contract basis doing patent work. And
Mhm.
the major benefit of that is it's a steady stream of income. They always have work. They cannot
Yeah.
hire enough people, and they provide me with benefits, which I have two young kids and a wife that I need health insurance for. So that to
Mhm.
me is a major benefit. So I would like to try to keep that job as much as I can. And I'm
Yeah.
kind of stuck in this position right now where I shouldn't say stuck because I'm glad to be in this position, but in this position where I am too busy to do both jobs, or
Mhm.
at least, to do both jobs and keep my sanity for an extended period. But, I would say over the last month, I'm probably putting in, 60-hour weeks plus, which I
Yeah.
don't like doing, particularly in the summer. I'm a hard worker, but there's a limit in the amount that I want to do, and especially when it's 60 hours. Doing, I don't know, custody trials and stuff. It does tend to burn you out a little bit.
Yeah.
So I would, I think, like to hire somebody that would allow me to keep that other job, and I have two options, and I'm leaning towards one, but I would
Mhm.
be curious to hear your input. So one, which seems like the most straightforward, would be to hire a paralegal. I could hire a full-time paralegal. I don't know how much paralegals in my area are paid. I've seen a few like job postings that where the amount was much lower than I expected. So can I ask you, you have a Chicago office, right? Or I could even ask about Wisconsin. Like how much, what would you say a paralegal is paid generally? You don't have to say specifically about your company, obviously, but
Yeah. So obviously, like every job is going to range on experience, but I think
yeah.
starting off, someone like fresh, no experience
No, so
whatsoever, your
I'm talking about an experienced paralegal. I need,
experience
5 years of minimum.
probably 80 to 100.
Okay, and that's in Wisconsin, right? So that's kind of what I thought.
That's more of the Chicago. It's probably both Chicago and
Okay, so
Milwaukee.
that was the range that I was expecting, and then I went on Indeed and I saw a couple for like 65, something like that, and these were looking for experience. So but whatever, yeah, 80 to 100, that would take a massive burden off of me, right? And
Mhm.
I always, and I'm sorry, I keep forgetting her name, but a lot of times in my head I go back to that podcast with who is the woman, the partner in your office. She's a female, and she did like breaks the record for
Tiffany.
revenue. She did like 1.2 million, and
Yeah, Tiffany.
Tiffany, yeah. I
Yeah.
always go back to that episode because it's always been my goal to grow and have higher number of associates under me to the point where I can step back and just kind of run the business, because I really think that's where my passion is. But
Yeah.
I look at, she talked extensively in that podcast about how much her paralegals, how much of the work they take off her plate, right? So I mean, she's able to generate that kind of revenue in, from what I understand,
Mhm.
is like middle of nowhere, Wisconsin. I think she said that on the podcast, right? Population of like
Yeah.
8,000 or something, right?
Yeah.
So Yeah, I don't know. I think, so that's one route to go, would be hire a paralegal and just, hire somebody. And that's why I would want someone with experience that could take off, take on a lot of the burden of, not just an entry level paralegal might help with things like scheduling and some communications and stuff like that. But I would be looking for someone that can draft a motion, that can,
Mm-hmm.
do stuff, anything that's not providing legal
Mm-hmm.
advice to a client.
Yeah.
So, that's route one. And if I could get that for, let's even say on the high, I don't know, take an average of 90K, they could probably take 70% of the work off my plate,
Mm-hmm.
which would be helpful. And option two is to is to just go full steam and hire an associate, which is a little bit more aggressive. Obviously that salary range is probably, I could go with someone a little bit less experienced, but I don't want a baby associate either. I would say
Yeah.
someone with ideally like 3 years experience would be, even two. If they were good enough, I would take
Mm-hmm.
them. Which I think in my area, again, I don't know. I'll ask you that question. What would you think an associate would go for at that point? And actually a follow up.
Family law associate with 3 years experience. I'm going to guess. I don't know your area, obviously, but
Yeah.
starting in the high 90s, probably moving up to 120, depending on their
Okay. Yeah.
competence level.
I thought minimum 120. I'm even thinking 120 to 150 range. And let me ask a similar question. Sorry, I'm jumping around all over the place, but what percentage? So if you're paying, let's just use easy numbers. It's going to be higher than this, but if you're paying an associate $100,000,
Mhm.
how much do you expect them to generate? I guess it's different, right? Because you're in a fixed fee model, so your numbers are probably a little bit different.
Mhm.
But for someone like me who's still working hourly, is it
Mhm.
about a third? Is it a little bit
I,
more than that?
I would say at a minimum a third. Yeah.
So yeah, probably
Minimum.
probably more like
Yeah.
40.
More like a quarter. It should be. I mean, they
Oh, oh,
25%
I
of
see.
whatever. Yeah. So 400 under that analysis if you're paying them 100.
Okay. So, and then another question, really getting into the weeds here. Let's just use that 100 number for ease of math. If you are paying that associate a salary of 100, what does that associate really cost you? And let's not include office space in there, because now
I've always I've always looked at 22% on top.
22. Okay, so that's actually
Yeah.
a little
This has been my round back of napkin number
bit. Okay.
for every. Now it's a little more, a little less, depending on obviously if they take benefits and on average, but that's on average 22% is what I always look at. That's
Wow.
my additional cost.
I
That's
was
just the
assuming I
that's
was
just the
assuming I
hard
had to
cost.
pay out benefits, and I was
That's not management cost, Tom. There's a whole hidden cost there. I'm talking just like employer side, FICA, and benefits. That's what
okay.
that is to
Wait,
me.
so what do you mean by management side?
You got to manage the person. That's going to cost your time. That's
Yeah.
expenditure of resources,
Right. Okay.
and it's always more than you think it'll be.
Yeah, and that's okay. I mean, to me, if I am looking at paying a paralegal 80 who can take off, some of the work off my plate, or I can get an
Mhm.
associate for, let's say 120. To me, it almost makes sense to go for to go for the associate. And so I hear what you're saying. I expect them, and tell me if I'm crazy. That's why I'm here, right? In my area, if let's say I'm paying them 120, and I'll say I'll take 25%, right? So their total cost to me is 160, and then my total costs for the business are for the year about 80,000, right? So we're talking $240,000. So just, these are actually pretty easy numbers to run with. So I would need that associate to cover their salary, their benefits, and costs for the business. That covers my offices, my software, Rocket Clicks, everything like that. They could, if they generated $240,000. So if they billed 20,000 a month, which really is not that much, I would feel comfortable hiring them. And I think I'm there, right? I did 24 in May. I think, June is looking similar. And I have a backlog of things that I need to get to that I just haven't had time to. No, none of
Mhm.
these is substantial, right? It's a lot of uncontested divorces and, prenuptial agreements that for people that are getting married next year, right? So, no huge money makers, but there's, 7, 8 of them that I'm just backed up on, that, I keep getting sucked into these trials and court appearances, and that unfortunately these things keep taking a back seat. But, to me, if that person can cover, if that person can bill 20,000 a month, and I'm going to do some quick math here. If I'm billing them at $325 an hour, which is, I think, low for my area. I only need them to bill 61 and a half hours a month. That's not
Mhm.
right. So sorry. So I ranted there, but that's 15 hours a week. Am I doing that right? Yeah.
What does ideal outcome look like? What does success look like?
Well,
What, regardless of the position, like what do you want to solve? What's the main problem you're looking to solve?
so I would say I always knew when I decided to, and again, I say leave patent law, but I haven't fully left it yet. But when I made that decision that I wanted to do something else with my life, that something else, I looked to people like you and a couple of others, maybe one or two others that I follow on LinkedIn. That I want to be a law firm owner, right? And I
Mhm.
decided to enter family law, A, because it's an area that interests me, and B, because I think that that was when I was kind of deciding family law or personal injury. Those were two things that I decided I was interested in as subjects and feeling like I would enjoy the work. I went with family law because I thought it would enable me to get to where I wanted to be quicker, and where I wanted to be is a law firm owner, manager. And I think, I've run the numbers in my head where, in order for me to be that law firm manager, I think I need maybe three, but probably realistically four associates working under me until
Mhm.
I could step back from all legal work and just be the manager. Right.
Mhm.
So hiring an associate rather than a paralegal gets me there faster.
Okay.
That was a long answer, but that's
So I'm just distilling that down to hearing you say, I want to work on the business exclusively as quick as I can.
that is what I tried to say,
Okay.
and said
Yep.
in 100 words instead of five. But
Okay.
yes,
You have right now, you have the luxury of outside income to supplement your law practice.
not only the luxury of outside income, but I can pick up more work there anytime I want. I've said this.
Okay.
I'm I'm paid on how many patents I draft a month.
Yeah.
When I was there full time, I was doing about 8 or 9. I'm currently doing about 4. If I went back to
Mhm.
if I got off this call and said, "Hey, I'm gonna start. I'm hiring an associate. I'm
Mhm.
gonna start doing eight patents a month again," they would say, "Thank you."
Mhm.
As I've said, they cannot hire people fast enough.
Yeah.
So I could go back to my patent job, make enough money to support my family, and all I would need from this associate, based on a salary of 120,000, using 25% extra for benefits and taxes and stuff like that, plus 80,000, which is my total business cost for the year. Right, I
Mhm.
need them to bill and slash collect, I guess is a better word,
Yeah.
$240,000 a year. That's not that
Yeah.
unrealistic.
Okay, I've got a number of thoughts based on what you told me here, Tom.
Yeah.
Some of which are on both sides of this equation. Okay,
Okay.
so I don't have advice for you. What I have is a lot of experience sharing and observations of
Yeah.
what I have seen here. When you were talking prior to what you just said, even you said my passion is for the business, and I wrote that down in my notes here.
Mm,
Um, that right there, the fact that you said that is it's an outlier statement. It's unusual.
mm,
The majority of family lawyers don't. That's not where their passion's at. Their passion's more in the practice of law, serving clients directly. You're approaching your law practice first as a business, not as a job or like an actual practice where you're
right.
practicing the law. So you don't see yourself long term in court and taking consults and all that. But you obviously got to do it now to get there. So I'm well
Yep.
aware of that. That's unusual. It also mirrors my approach to starting this firm. As you know, I didn't start practicing right away. I hired an attorney right off the bat. Now I had to, like you, I had other resources that I could do that. So that's the route that I took. So it'd be hypocritical for me to say, no, Tom, don't hire an
Mm,
attorney
yeah.
based on the fact that's what I did. Okay. So I'll just point that out just to be clear there. Another thing is your first hire has significantly outsized importance on the growth and the future of your firm.
Yeah.
Your first 5 hires, your first 10 hires. Now it starts to diminish, obviously, the bigger you get, and it becomes less and less. You make a bad hire at 37, that's a lot easier to overcome than making a bad hire at number one.
Right.
Okay. Right. So my encouragement as you think about this position, whether it's a paralegal or whether it's an attorney, I think you hire the best player on the board.
Yeah.
Okay. If you find an incredible paralegal who can take a lot of work off your shoulders, who can handle 90% of the client communication, who could draft all your docs, knows the court system, knows the clerk at Judge so and so's office, if you can find that person, but your other option then is a decent looking attorney from a skill standpoint, but they don't have any of that and you got to train them. I'd probably go with number one. Okay.
So
That's just the thought, the
yeah.
paralegal.
Okay.
Okay. Because that first hire, man, if they're a culture fit and they're smart and they're ambitious, that's someone you can build around, and you need that cornerstone, if you so to speak, if you can get that in the very beginning. Just anecdotally, the third attorney we hired is our managing partner today, and
Hmm.
she's a centerpiece of our firm. I mean, she's a co-managing partner with Katie and Holly. It's just we've built our firm around these two individuals because we've got those cornerstone talents there. Another thing is I would not. Talent is everything at this level.
Yeah.
If you got to pay 20% more to get a talented person, you're probably going to get 3 to 4 times the output.
Yep. Agreed.
So if you find someone who's so strong and you legitimately check their references and take time to hire them, don't do a gut call day one and hire them. But if you really feel like this is the person, go over the top on your offer, get them in the door, do what you have to. They will pay for themselves in spades.
Hmm.
So don't skimp on these uber talented early hires if you can find them. They're hard to find, super hard to find. But if you can do that, do that. Like I remember, like in Holly's case, we I made an offer to her. She I kind of thought she would take it, and then she called me back later and kind of said no. Okay. I went to my partner Tony and said, Tony, we're going to go over the top on this, and we're going to just blow it out. We're going to make an offer she can't refuse, can't say no to, and that's what we did, and it paid off every year since then.
Yeah.
And then so it's that worked for us, and I've done it other times too, and it's worked almost every time. I would back to the passion for the business. If that's your passion, you're going to find that it's going to give you more energy,
Hmm.
and the more you can put yourself in that position where you're working within your passion and your strength zone, running your law firm, get there as quick as you can. So that probably lends itself to hiring the attorney first, right?
Yeah.
Because that'll enable you to get there quicker. Just have eyes wide open that your hire rate on attorneys is probably going to be 1 in 3 or 1 in 2 if you're lucky. Okay.
So what higher rate? What do you mean by that? It's like
Your
people that will
like
say
your
no.
retention rate, your retention
Oh,
rate.
okay.
Ours is like 1 in 3 probably,
Okay.
that stick over the long term. So we've
And
gotten better. That number's improved through the years, but
is that
it
people
wasn't
you've let go or people that left or a combination?
both
Okay.
combo. Yeah. Yeah. So it's tougher to hire lawyers.
Yeah.
It is. You've got different dynamics that you're working with there. It's tougher to hire lawyers than it is to hire good paralegals, in my opinion. Just what I've experienced. And because you can hire a paralegal sometimes who's not trained as a paralegal, but they're just really solid workers and really smart. Then you could train them up. You don't probably want this on your first hire, but
No, I don't.
yeah.
I definitely
So
do not. So that's I guess the question to you. So I mentioned an associate. I think my ideal target is somewhere around a year three. In my head, that is an associate that has had enough time to basically learn how to be a family lawyer, right?
yeah,
Learn the motion practice and, learn the rules and of the courts and everything like that. Get to know some of the judges and other attorneys, all that important stuff. But, anything more than that, I don't know. Like what, in your opinion, where do we start seeing like diminishing returns in terms of like, I might pay a fifth year way more than I would pay a third year, but are they that much better in terms of knowing the rules? Because
Mhm.
I expect and look forward to having some management over this associate, but I want
Mhm.
that management to be in terms of, this is how, at my firm, this is how we communicate with clients. This is how often we communicate with clients. This is how and when we ask for reviews. This is how we do consults. And in the beginning, I still expect that I'm going to be doing a good portion of the consults because I like doing that. So, my thought was around year three, that's enough time for an associate to, learn how to
Yeah,
be learn how
yeah.
to be an effective lawyer and learn the rules and importantly know that they like the field.
That's important. That last point you made about liking the field.
Yeah.
I mean, your instinct, I agree with Tom here. I think 3 to 5 is that sweet zone. Some people get there quicker than 3, some take all 5. But if they're not there by 5, they're likely not going to get there. And I would say for your first hire, that if you can find someone in that range, that's probably best. I like I like people who, especially females in family law, who have done something prior to going into law, like they were a paralegal for a number of years, they worked in business or something, or a counselor and went to law school at night and stuff. Those people I have found just tend to have, they're better with people. Their people skills are more mature, more developed.
Yeah.
And frankly, a lot of them just seem to have a little more ambition because they've been beat around a little bit. So they really want to, they're just drivers. They want more for themselves and their families and so forth. So that's general speaking. I mean, you can find some 10-year, 15-year attorneys that are just great fits, but majority of the time they have their own way to do it. They're not going to take coaching well. They're not going to listen to you, young whippersnapper. What do you know, sort of thing. I've
Right.
been practicing,
And I
even
think
though they can't go out and get a client on their own. They got to work somewhere. That's
yeah.
just
So
a lot of times
I
the
think
attitude you get.
that's an advantage to the associate that's coming on board for me, is that I have no plan. I have no plan to micromanage this associate from a legal perspective, right?
Mhm.
Again, a third year associate where they're working, every motion they're drafting is probably still going to a partner or a senior associate and is getting reviewed. And right from my perspective, I'm going to be, yeah, of course I'm going to be asking them, where's the case? What's your strategy and stuff? But, unless they're doing something that I think is a terrible decision, my advice is going to be, right. My management is more going to be from, right, communication reviews and, right. I think I've said
Mhm.
that before, so I don't want to repeat myself, but that's why I'm looking for that sweet spot where I don't have to micromanage them in terms of the law. Cause the reality
Mhm.
is that a third year associate has more experience practicing family law than I do at this point.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
right? So that's an advantage, I think, for them coming to me, right? They can get paid the same amount or more. They'll have much more autonomy to practice the case the way they want to.
Mhm.
And I think I'd be a pretty easy person to work for, as long as, again, to me, I've learned through you, but even before I started, and, on my own experience, how important communication is. So that
Mhm.
is like the one thing that I would kind of be,
Yeah.
annoying, making
Yeah.
sure that they're doing. But, other than that, kind of run the cases the way you want to.
Right.
And, I think, we'll talk about comp on a future podcast, because I don't want to, harp on this issue too much. But I think my plan is to put a listing out there and just start meeting people, right?
Mhm.
I mean, I can put something on Indeed or a job listing. I think you pay for it, but I don't think it's that much. And I can do some interviews. And if I find someone I really like, I don't know, maybe I'll put a listing out there and I find I get no bites, and maybe I thought the salary range is 50% more than I thought, and maybe it's not feasible. And then at that point, I'll
Yeah.
decide, all right, maybe a paralegal makes more sense right now.
Well,
Or
Indeed's a cheap way to get answers to those questions. So I would encourage you to think about putting two out, one for a paralegal and one for an attorney,
hmm,
and just
okay,
see what you get. I encourage you to think about, look at this as hiring the best player on the board, kind of like a draft for a pro sports team, right?
yeah.
They don't really need this position, but I mean, that person's so uber talented. We're just going to get them in and figure it out.
Well, I don't want to wind up like the Mets, who just buys all the expensive players. And they
Well, you're limit yourself to one, but if you get,
yeah,
yeah. So
yeah, but yeah, no, I agree.
by the time you go through the process, Tom, and start collecting and screening and doing some meetings,
Yeah,
you're going to be into August probably, and you're going to have a good sense where
yeah,
your marketing is going. You might find that it's so gangbusters that maybe you bite off one and then two right after that. I mean, that could happen.
yeah,
You could put
that would be
someone in
awesome.
a holding pattern.
Or even one in August. We'll call it late summer, early fall, and then another one, very early next year, when what's
Yeah.
supposed to be the busy season. So I'd be thrilled with that.
I think if I had my choice, I would probably hire, if you're willing to still go to court and you could find a great paralegal, I'd probably lean toward hiring the paralegal first. That
Okay.
still is going to enable you to work. You don't have the risk of the attorney. You have a greater risk hiring an attorney. Attorneys also, when they leave, take clients with them. And so you've
Yeah,
got that risk sitting there. So on balance, I would probably lean toward that. But if you find a great associate, make it happen.
yeah, I am leaning towards the associate. I think I agree with you. What makes more sense is probably the paralegal, but you could say that about anything.
Yeah.
What made more sense would have been for me to stay at my big law position 5 years ago, where I'd be making
Yeah. Yeah.
$500,000 right now. But that's not what I wanted to do. So uh,
Yeah.
so who knows?
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it's a riskier move hiring an associate for sure, but I think if it pays off, right? And everything's a gamble to an extent. If it pays
Mhm.
off, then it gets me where I want to be that much faster. And then yeah, one last question on this topic, and then we'll talk more last next time. The Have you or do you know firms that pay people like a base salary and then a percentage based on how much they bring in?
What we did when we started, we paid a base that was effectively a draw against what they brought in, what
Okay.
they collected. So, by way of example, let's say we hired someone at 50,000 a year,
Yep.
and we said, okay, we're going to pay you a third of whatever you collect. So they collected 150, they don't get a bonus because
Right.
now they've basically covered their salary. Anything above that, they get a third. We
Okay.
broke it down by month or quarter or something like that. That's how we started. Today, it's effectively that as well.
Okay.
It's percentages are different, and it's different by role and different things like that. But yeah, that's a
Do
very
you
common.
think a third was the right number?
No, it was way too much to start with because yeah, we ended up getting ourselves in big trouble over the years because we kept adding more infrastructure and support costs.
Mm,
Um, Initially, the model was you don't get a paralegal, you just got to figure it out. You can do it, do everything yourself, and that works pretty well at
yeah.
that. But as we started to scale, it didn't work anymore at all because we needed a way to bring up younger attorneys and experienced attorneys. And if everyone's just paid a percentage of what they bring in, there's just not an incentive to spend time training and hiring those other people.
Yes. Yep.
So the model that we have today is we have Holly and Katie, our managing partners, and everyone reports up to them, and
Mm.
they do all the training, and that model works great at our level. But I mean, where you're at, it's not bad to start there. I would start with a lower percentage though, for sure.
Okay, because that is where I thought, and I'll tell you, you explained the process of a draw, but that's exactly how my job at my patent firm works, and I get 35%. So yeah, about a third is what I was thinking. I don't know, maybe that's again, we could talk about that next time. I will definitely not be hiring an associate between now and our next podcast, but
Yeah, that's
hopefully I
fine.
will have met with a couple.
Well, I love these conversations. These are growth conversations, Tom. So this has been cool to
Which,
hear where you're at.
for
Yeah.
people that listen to the April podcast, that this is probably not what they expected the May podcast to sound like. So hopefully not.
Your frown is
Hopefully we're
turned
not back
upside
in April,
down.
in June. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, that's great. All right. If you're listening and you'd love to see, I mean, Tom has been very candid through this last 9 months to a year, and he's been really raw and vulnerable with what he shared. And all of his numbers are on my website at jerrysterlinghughes.com. You can also follow Tom at LinkedIn. You can find hartinfamilylaw.com for his site. So it's been fun watching you, Tom, as you've started your journey, your entrepreneurial journey.
thanks for having me, Jeff.
Cool. All right. See you next month.
All right, bye.